Now, over the last few weeks, we have witnessed the insurmountable grief and rage of the people from all walks of life. People from across the country have taken to the streets to demand justice for the victim of the spine-chilling Kolkata rape and murder. Amidst this furor, there are several other such cases that have made headlines as well. Now, whether the sexual assault of the two nursery students in Badlapur, the gang rape of a 14-year-old girl in Nagaon, and the rape and murder of a nurse in Uttarakhand. Amidst the outrage, we take a moment today to examine how to make sure that such dastardly crimes can be prevented. NewsX has proposed a 6-point plan in this regard. We propose that the Indian Medical Association should launch India's largest study into sexual predation. A team of the Behavioral Sciences Unit of the FBI must be invited to India to share their findings and train our personnel. The study should be chaired by India's top psychologists, and the prison department should be given access to convicted sexual predators to conduct the study. All convicted sexual predators should undergo a brain mapping study to identify neurological issues. Findings of the Indian study should be published within a given time frame, and updations should be made as and when deemed fit. Our proposal has been endorsed and lauded by several eminent people, including Prataprao Jadhav, the Minister of State for Health and Family Welfare, West Bengal Governor C.V. Ananda Bose, IMA President R.V. Ashokan, Kiran Bedi, former Lieutenant Governor of Puducherry, and Advocate Seema Kushwaha, Nirbhaya's lawyer, amongst others. Today, we are being joined by big faces, especially from America. We have with us special guest Mr. Mark Safaric. He's a retired supervisory special agent of the Behavioral Analysis Unit of the Federal Bureau of Investigation from America. With a 3-decade career in law enforcement, Mr. Safaric has worked with the FBI for over 23 years, where he spent over half the time as criminal profiler. Thank you so much, Mr. Safaric, for joining me on the telecast. And understanding from you, how did you get involved with Behavioral Sciences Unit of the Federal Bureau of Investigation?
Well, initially I was in law enforcement as a police officer and a detective working violent crimes in California. And this was in the early 1980s. And at the time, during a homicide school, we had a couple of FBI profilers who came out to give us some to talk about how they looked at complex violent crimes, specifically sexual assaults and homicides. And I was actually fascinated by this different way of looking at, violent crime from a behavioral perspective, integrating that with the physical evidence and forensic evidence and behavioral evidence in complex crimes. And at the time, I had a couple of homicide cases because I was working homicide as a detective that I thought would benefit from that type of analysis. So that's really what got me started working with the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit. And after about a year, I decided that that was really the direction I wanted to take my career to become an FBI behavioral profiler. And so I applied to the FBI, and then it took me really about 10 years once I got into the FBI to then be promoted into the Behavioral Analysis Unit, which is where I stayed for the balance of almost 13 years for my career in the FBI, and then I retired and started my own forensic behavioral consulting business, doing really the same type of work that I did in the FBI.
You've also worked with Dr. Ann Bergs, and we have spoken to her as well. But we also wanted to understand from you that in your 3-decade career, what have you observed about the psychosis of sexual predators?
Well, I think initially when in the 1970s, when we really started, the behavioral unit started doing research looking at sexual predators who both killed and didn't kill their victims, there wasn't a lot of research that had been done at that time. There were several researchers, Nick Groth and others, who were doing some of this type of research, but there wasn't a lot of research for us to look at. So the FBI, the behavioral unit, started doing our own research, mostly looking at homicide offenders. But of course, many of those, serial offenders sexually assaulted their victims, because we were trying to understand, what is the dynamic of this interaction between the victims and the offenders? What types of offenders are we dealing with? Can we categorize them? Because they hadn't actually really been categorized at that time. So that research continued. And then as I think this phenomenon, that started with Silence of the Lambs and others, and it got the public very interested in this type of work. Research started being done around the country and around the world, looking at both homicide, sexual predators, serial rape offenders, to understand both from an academic standpoint and psychological standpoint what drives these offenders, and then from the FBI's perspective, because really our job really is to help law enforcement solve these cases of unknown offender cases of sexual predation, either in murder or in serial sexual assault, or just simply in sexual assault. So our perspective was a bit different than the academic perspective, sort of like Ann Burgess, who I know is a very good friend of mine and whom I've published with before and taught for Ann. So her perspective's a little different than mine, and I think she shared that in her interview, looking from a behavioral perspective at the actual crimes and what is the behavioral dynamic, and then linking those aspects back to the offenders, and then of course doing research and publishing in those areas.
Did you also notice any behavioral patterns amongst men who then become rapists and murderers?
I think it's very broad. I think it's very difficult to categorize or sort of pigeonhole men in a particular box as a predator or as a killer. What we've learned both in studying individuals who don't murder but say sexually assault or rape, and I use sexual assault because there's various types of sexual assault beyond besides raping a woman. But I've done research looking at sexual offenders who rape and murder elderly women. So I've specialized in sort of that area of sexual assault. But those types of offenders are different. The ones that murder versus the ones that simply sexually assault. And then, understanding the type of rapist that you're dealing with or sexual predator really comes down to looking at the specific dynamics of each individual case, which I think in the interview with Dr. Burgess, the woman that interviewed her was making that, the same acknowledgement that you have to look at each case, but there are different types of rapists. There are different types of killers. They kill for different reasons. They sexually assault for different reasons. Sometimes it is in the context of power. Sometimes it's within the context of revenge or retaliation. Other times it's opportunistic. In other cases, it's sort of that attempt to, they're inadequate individuals, so they're attempting to have this sort of pseudo relationship with the victim when they sexually assault. And you can determine these different types of offenders by looking at the behavior that they engaged in with their victims.
Now, can a psychiatric study to identify such patterns of behavior help improve conviction rates in such cases?
I think really from our perspective, certainly, I think any research that looks at predators, whether they're murdering or whether they're sexually assaulting and not killing, helps those individuals who have to analyze those individuals when they're arrested. It helps the court system to understand these types of offenders and which ones will recidivate, more readily than others. So it can impact how they're sentenced, how, it can impact the conviction. From our perspective, it helps for identification, looking at the dynamics within a crime to identify the type of offender that we're dealing with, type of rapist, type of sexual assaulter. I think all of those would basically lend themselves to understanding the predator and understanding how we approach them in trial and then in conviction and in sentencing, not in conviction, but in sentencing. How do you sentence somebody like this? Are these people amenable to being, to getting psychological help in prison, or are they psychopathic, probably will not benefit from any kind of, help, psychological help or testing within prison, and should remain in custody probably for life.
Now, we at NewsX have also pitched for a sexual predator study in our country. Now, considering the breadth of knowledge in America already on this subject, how would you recommend the law enforcement agencies go about doing this study?
Well, I think it's a multidimensional problem. There's plenty of research looking at sexual assault and rape. I mean, there are lots of journals that have published many articles. I've, with colleagues of mine, have published on offenders who are 50 years or older that sexually assault and murder. We've published on juveniles who sexually assault. There is a lot of research that I think the Indian government can draw from, really critical European research, American research that has been done very well. But I think that the issue is, how do you integrate that information that we already know about sexual predators? How do you integrate that information into the government, into law enforcement? Because it has to be a cooperative effort. And in India, as I understand it, there's an older culture and then the newer culture. So, the moral values of the older culture clash with the newer culture. And law enforcement sometimes doesn't look at, sexual assault that perhaps the way they do in the United States. So it's not only the research, which I think there is lots of good research, plenty of excellent research, but how do you then take that research and train your law enforcement investigators, change the mindset of those individuals, change the mindset of the public, change the mindset of the judiciary system, who then tries those individuals and then sentences those individuals. Everybody has to be playing on the same field. And all of those various components, I think, have to come together and recognize the seriousness of this type of violent crime and give it its due.
How do you suggest India must incorporate the best practices from the system in place in the United States?
Law enforcement has to learn how to investigate these crimes and how to prosecute, and then the attorneys, the state prosecutors, have to learn how to prosecute them. And the judiciary has to look at the seriousness of these crimes and then sentence these individuals to appropriate, prison sentences. So you can't just have one component. You can't have the Indian government or the forensic medical institutes in India doing this research and doing good research on Indian men, although I suggest that the outcomes will be similar to what we find in Europe and in the United States in terms of the types of offenders we have. But then, how do you take that information and weave it into, a constructive forward-thinking dynamic that involves law enforcement and prosecutors and the judicial component and the public's perception, changing the public's perception of is this okay? Is this acceptable? I think it's a difficult job, but it's going to involve, I think, a culture shift from law enforcement and prosecutors and the judicial system, forensic investigators, your medical individuals. Like, for instance, in many hospitals in the United States, we have SART teams, sexual assault response teams. So we have nurses, registered nurses, who are trained specifically in dealing with women who have been sexually assaulted or raped. They know the tests to conduct, the physical tests to conduct, the photographs to take, the interview questions to ask. And so that's a really important component. If you can't gather the correct evidence when a woman comes in, that has alleged a sexual assault, if you don't have the correct people that understand how to ask the right questions, collect the right evidence, take the right photographs, then you can lose a case right there. So we have those kinds of teams: SANE nurses, sexual assault nurse examiners, sexual assault response teams, all of that integrated in the medical community, right? And then law enforcement investigators that get the training in how do you conduct these kinds of investigations, so that you can then bring that case to a prosecutor who can then bring that case to court. So, all of these integrate together, and culturally, changing the mindset of the culture of a male, an old school sort of male dominated society. That's not true in sort of the newer sense of the younger people in India. But, can you change that mindset in an older culture? It's a very, I think, overwhelming task, but it involves everybody. Research is a part of it, I think, but I think there are many components that need to be, addressed.
Mark, also understanding from you, you've dealt with these cases on a first-hand basis, and while dealing with these criminals, you of course have witnessed the worst in humanity. What were the kind of mental and physical challenges that you had to suffer from while facing the extreme levels of brutality and degeneracy over the several years that you were partaking in these studies?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I get this question a lot when I present. I think it's an attitude. And I look at it in terms of objectivity. My goal is I'm not for one side or the other. I'm for the truth. And I have the training and ability and experience to look at these crimes. And I don't allow myself to become emotionally involved in the case. And this is the type of work that I find fascinating and extremely challenging, but I don't let my emotions get into the case. I'm looking at the dynamics of the case, these complex cases, and I understand the minutia of the various aspects of these cases. And I just have trained myself to be extremely objective, even when listening to law enforcement investigators who are presenting a case, right? Because the way they present it will be different, because they'll have a bias about how they look at the case or how they investigated the case. Really, it's up to me to look at all of the information they have and then to make my assessment. But to stay emotionally neutral in this, and it's not hard for me because I've been doing it for so long. I think for some people that is very difficult. And those kinds of people would not make a very good, criminal profiler because they can't keep their emotions out of it. And you have to remain objective from the very beginning and not take anything as an assumption. You must support everything looking at the behavioral evidence, the physical evidence, the forensic evidence, and integrating those into a story that makes sense for the crime that you're looking at. Can I explain why all of this behavior is happening and what does it mean without becoming emotionally involved? And it's difficult sometimes because we look at very egregious material, videotapes made by offenders that never see the light of day in the public, but we get these kinds of things. And you're right, they're difficult, but if you stay objective about it and rely on your training and your education and your experience, that's the way I look at these cases. And for me personally, because by the time cases come to me as a criminal profiler, as an FBI profiler, agencies have already worked these cases for sometimes years. So it's almost like the last step. And so I'm there representing the victim in this case. And it's my job. If I can't stay objective, I can't help the victim or the victim's families. So it's really incumbent upon me, and I hold myself to the very high standard, to not become emotionally involved and to stay incredibly objective as I can be when I'm evaluating the information.
All right, thank you so much, Mas Safarik, former special agent of the FBI, speaking with us exclusively, talking to us about the behavioral temperament patterns that he has been able to experience and then categorize these criminals, these rapists, and how their psyche functions. Meanwhile, we also have Dr. Lakshmikant Rathi. He's the president of the Indian Psychiatric Society. Thank you very much for joining us on the telecast, Dr. Rathi. And my first question, of course, talking about the NewsX campaign that has gained quite the traction about an appeal to the Indian Medical Association, the Health Ministry, the ICMR to conduct India's largest ever psychological study into the mindsets of rapists. Now, would you be willing to extend your support and your organization support to this campaign?
Yes, I will be definitely willing to extend help to this campaign in the capacity of the President of Indian Psychiatric Society also, because mindset and mental health is very important in such incidences which are happening nowadays. So I think if we focus on them, this will be definitely helpful.
How do you think the profiling of rapists and studying their mindsets will help the law enforcement agencies in our country?
I think if we keep the profiling also, we can be knowing that which people are there who are more prone to do such crimes. If we take the records, for example, I feel that many people are having psychopathic minds in the beginning. I also feel that along with this keeping records, our screening should also be done as we do for the physical health. For example, some traits are in the beginning since like school days. For example, stealing, lying, gambling, prostitution, increased use of porn, and addiction. These are the things which are giving rise to such crimes in the society much more. So I think this profiling of these characters, trait characters or personality traits, and there should be a screening also along with this, and there should be a lot of mental health awareness also if you want to remove this from the roots from this kind, which are the reasons because of which the person does it. I think definitely brain mapping, mind reading, involving mental health professionals in this will definitely work or help a lot to remove this problem.
How do you think the Indian Psychiatric Society can take this forward? How would you be able to help? And what is it that you require from the government to help you in this campaign?
First of all, as we have been always telling, that fund allocation is as such not much as there is for the physical health, for the mental health. Gradually it is increasing. We feel that this fund allocation should be increased, for which whatever told you, this can be done. because as such the IPS has got psychiatrists all over the India, in some few villages also. So if such screening camps are done, where the people are analyzed as they have been analyzed, as we measure our BP or cardiac test. Similarly, mental health status has to be analyzed, and it can be done through the psychologists, social workers, clinical psychologists, mental health, other professionals, and the people who are vulnerable to such crimes can be identified. And when they are identified earlier, as the medical science always tells, the prevention is better than cure, then probably their counseling can be done. They should be taught about the self-discipline. One more thing which I would like to tell this recently, that moral values are to be taught right from the beginning, from the school days. When I was a student, there was a subject called as moral science, which used to tell you what is the value of discipline, what is the value of education, what is the value of parents, teachers, and what is how one can self-restrain and keep some control on his undesired behavior. And I feel this is the requirement of the day. If such things are taught from the beginning, then definitely it will help. Secondly, government can help us in spreading the mental health awareness in public, because more and more mental health awareness will spread to the district hospitals, their district officers, keeping everywhere training camps for them, in which Indian Psychiatric Society will definitely be helping to do that. We have recently launched a suicidal helpline also for the public, where people can contact us on this. Like that, if any specific requirement comes from the government, then also in that capacity, we would like to fulfill that requirement also.
On our channel, we also got a number of FBI researchers and special agents who have conducted such similar studies, which have shown massive impact in understanding the motives of the criminals and developing patterns, and thereby nabbing these criminals and ensuring that such acts are prevented. And like I said, you know, you're actually apprehending the culprit even before he acts and rapes an individual. Do you think these individuals, these researchers, teams from the FBI can be roped in and brought to India?
Definitely, when already the studies are done and they have shown the results, they can be done. Only the context has to be changed, because our cultural context is a little different from this, theirs. So I think we will have to do it on a more regional languages, regional basis, because most of our population is also not highly educated. So we will have to change it a little bit, as we change many of the psychological testing taken out from the Western countries, so that they get adapted to our Indian culture. And similarly, if the studies are taken and adapted to our Indian culture and done in our Indian environment by our Indian scientists, I feel definitely this will help in controlling, or at least trailing, or these people who are more prone to give rise to such crimes.
Do you feel that brain mapping techniques can also be used to conduct such studies?
Actually, brain mapping techniques is usually already being used for the treatment purposes. For example, as a psychiatrist, do electroencephalography and brain mapping of the people who are suffering from mental health illnesses. Actually, mental health illnesses, insanity is not equivalent. Hardly there are 5 to 10% of cases. Brain mapping and electroencephalography, as we do ECG of heart, has shown many changes for people who are suffering from minor illnesses like anxiety, depression, which is very common, and as far as stress also. So this can definitely give us an idea about the mental state of the patient. For example, it has got alpha, beta, theta, delta waves. Alpha denominates relaxed person, beta denominates in anxiety people. Like that, definitely, as it helps in patient's treatment also, this can definitely help in recognizing and all the people who might be having some abnormalities at the mental health level, which make them more prone to commit such crimes. I feel that studies as FDA has done, we can also go ahead with that, and it will be useful in my opinion.
Can this exercise be performed annually in the future, so that the findings which can be made public are periodically accurate and updated?
Yes, it will be a very good idea, because anything required does not give you a result instantly. All about the study requires a follow-up. And similarly, whatever we will be learning out of these exercises when the end results come, and we will be collaborating it along with the other global agencies also, I think this will definitely help us, because these problems are not related to any one country or anything. These problems are more or less of addictions, and all these are becoming a globally problem for this. And I will say definitely these two things are very, very much behind this crime, this creating such crimes, addiction as well as pornography use a lot. So definitely timely profiling of this, timely follow up this, and timely making required corrections in these programs will definitely help us to have a better society, having a good mental health components, so that these incidences which are troubling everybody will definitely diminish in future.
Now, what other suggestions do you think can be made as far as profiling of rapists is considered in our country?
I think first is that the record should be kept. I'm not aware how many times they have done this crime, in which situation they have done this crime. I think definitely if one is doing it again and again, and we keep the records of the people who commit murders and all that somebody has done 1, 2, 3. Similarly, the record of this person should be definitely kept, so that once they commit the crime, if they are properly followed up, then there will be chances that they will not be able to commit those crimes again. So it will definitely help us to identify these people, keep a watch on these people, and if you do this from all the angles, then definitely this will help us to reduce this all these hateful crimes, we can say, for the society.
Thank you, Dr. Lakshmikant Rathi, President of the Indian Psychiatric Society, for speaking to us and joining us in our campaign to spread awareness, and also then ask the government agencies to work towards the creation of a study for sexual offenders in a bid to reduce these crimes. I'm also right now being joined by Dr. Amrit Patajoshi. He's the Secretary of the Indian Psychiatric Society and the Joint Secretary of SARC Psychiatric Federation. Thank you very much for joining us. And my first question about, how do you view that NewsX has launched a campaign, and this campaign is to appeal the Indian Medical Association, the Union Health Ministry and the ICMR to conduct India's largest ever psychological study into the minds of rapists. Now, would you be willing to extend your support to this campaign?
Yeah, absolutely. As a secretary of the Indian Psychiatric Society and as an individual member of the group, as well as a doctor or a psychiatrist and as a father, I would be 100% in support of the initiative you have taken, and I would like to congratulate you for this.
Thank you so much. Do you think that psychological profiling of rapists can help the law enforcement agencies in both post facto and pre facto action in reducing the chances of rapes happening in the country?
I think profiling of sexual predators would lead to the creation of more accurate policies and laws to prevent rapes and sexual assault, as well as to take proper action later on once a crime has been committed. But I think it should not be basically based on assumption, intuition or anecdotal evidence. We need to collect and analyze data on a wide range of variables, including the demographic characteristics of the offenders, their criminal histories, the circumstances surrounding their crimes, and their psychological profiles. Why it is important is because many of the crimes are done on the spur of the moment. You know, there are a lot of things that make somebody think of doing such things, but there are certain triggers which might lead to such acts being occurred. So the whole study, the whole analysis should be based on these things, and if you do a proper analysis, it would reveal common patterns and factors that contribute to sexual offending, such as a specific personality type. We can understand which personality type is more liable to do such things. Environmental triggers, which I was speaking about, or we also see people who are abusing, who are sexual offenders, have also been offended or have been abused in their childhood. These information would then be used to refine risk assessment tools. So we can do risk assessment tools of who are more liable to do these things. We can identify potential offenders before they commit crimes, and develop targeted interventions. So what we can do is we can also, it's not just about catching them, we can also intervene them so such that such thoughts do not come, and even if such thoughts come, they would not indulge in such heinous activities. That's very important. And it would lead to better laws. For instance, legal definition of sexual crime could be updated to reflect the nuances revealed by profiling studies, ensuring that laws are comprehensive and inclusive of the various forms of sexual violence. We are just concerned about rape, but there are a lot of things that are going on. And if you look at online, what is going on, times are changing, the way people sexual behavior is changing, the way people are, becoming predators online also is very important. So the laws have to be according to how the things are changing. That has to be dynamic, and that has to be inclusive. So I think that is very important. Policies and laws have to align and be in tune with the changing time.
How do you feel that such profiling then can be conducted in our country? Can the Indian Psychiatric Society help government agencies in fulfilling these goals?
First of all, let me tell you, there are two different aspects of all these things. One is a criminal psychology part, one is a criminal profiling part. So if you look at forensic psychology or criminal psychology, I think as psychiatrists, the Indian Psychiatric Society, which encompasses 10,000 psychiatrists and the second biggest psychiatric association in the world, would love to contribute in any way that is possible to help prevent such crimes. And if somebody has done something, to help the victims as well as make corrective measures so that because if you look at sexual offenders, they are habitual offenders. They do it regularly. A few number of people to large number of acts, and that is very repetitive. So we can intervene, we can make sure that they don't repeat the same mistakes. And as the society, we are very, very open to profiling of individuals. Maybe look at the personality traits, look at the people who are more vulnerable to such acts, including people who have been abused, people who are into substance, people who come from broken families, people who have low self-esteem. A lot of people do this, to show that they are they want to show their dominance. We need to change the basic fabrics of society also. The way we look down on our females, the way we look at our females, if they wear little, the so-called modern dressing sense, they feel that this is an invitation to do whatever they feel like doing. I think the whole mindset has to change. We have to get into the minds of the male. We have to change the social fabric. We have to make it more equal. We have to make sure that girls have a say. We have to teach our boys that we are not the dominant, gender. We both are equal. We need to respect our females. We need to respect consent. We need to respect that the girl can be better than us in many respects. And I think that is where the whole thing is coming. And I see a lot of people who are into sexual offense have, the misconceived ideas about sexuality. A lot of people think that if they rape somebody or do something like this, the sexual, potency will improve. I think there are a lot of things that go on in our country, and we need to change the whole fabric of our society. And unless we do that, whatever profiling we do, because many of the people come from our rural areas, many of the people come from poor families, and they are not always under the scrutiny of their guardians or families or friends. There are a lot of migrants who come to cities. So it's a very mixed bag. I think whatever can help the society, whatever can help in reduction of such crime, whatever can help the victims in getting back to their feet. And one aspect I forgot to tell you is the profiling of the victims is also very important. We need to understand how does the perpetrator understand that this might be my victim. What are the traits they see in somebody when they think of doing something like this? It's not that they do it with everybody. They also choose and pick their victims. At one aspect, there is an impulsivity. They see somebody and they feel that they should do. And in another aspect, there is also a lot of planning going on. So we need to understand the whole profiling of the victims are also important. Not in terms of defaming them, not in terms of putting that, but what are the risk factors? Or the people who are more liable to be, because we see a pattern. Somebody who is abusing is repeatedly abusing, and somebody who has been abused has been repeatedly abused by multiple people. And that's what studies tell, and that's what my clinical practice also tells. I think we need to look at both aspects also, so that we can work on the people who are more liable to be, abused, And at the other end, we also need to work on the people who are going to be the abusers. I think what you are doing goes a long way. We are going to do, if you want us to analyze data, if you want to provide us you with data, we can work together. We can work, all of us can work together in making our whole country a safer and a more livable place.
You are also the Joint Secretary of the SARC Psychiatric Federation. Can a large-scale study in India help in sharing the findings with SARC nations and help build better policies in this regard?
Now, what I want to tell you is that you are very, very right. Because if you look at the whole southeastern population, we share certain similar cultural, similar thought processes. We are united by certain things. So maybe we can combine together to work on the profiling. We can analyze the data and share it with the SARC countries and maybe do workshops with them, enlighten them, give them better understanding of how to go about such things. And maybe that will go a long way in preventing such crimes happening in their countries. As the elder big brother in this region, we have our responsibilities also. And I think we are open to collaborating with them, helping them, and making their place also a safer.
Now, would you make an appeal to the Government of India on behalf of the Indian Psychiatric Society to launch this study?
As I told you, we are very, very open to whatever will help our society. We are ready to walk the extra mile. And if we have a good document and we can work on the whole evidence that goes on in profiling, because a lot of things have been done by the FBI. FBI has a very, very good unit which works on it. And I think in India we lack such unit. We can always have a unit. We can always work on it. Results are never guaranteed in this world, but if you make efforts, we can always do it. And we would be, if everybody is online with this, we can discuss it with our executive council, which is the cabinet of the IPS, and maybe we can put forward any letter you want to the government to start somewhere, something to make everybody believe that yes, we are serious about all these things. We are not just, sharing posts on Insta or lighting candles. We are also ready to hold hands and walk the extra mile with whomsoever is the victim or the sufferer in this case. So we are always ready.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Amrit Joshi, for joining us on the telecast, showing your support for our campaign. Joining me now on the telecast is Renu Bhatia, who is the chairperson of the Haryana State Commission for Women. Thank you, Ms. Bhatia, for joining us. And of course, talking about the NewsX campaign, the sexual offender study, where we are inviting the most qualified medical minds to discuss the profiling of rapists. Would you and your commission be willing to extend your support to this campaign?
I really thank NewsX for this very important subject which they've taken up, because it's a need of an hour. As every day we find somewhere or the other, these kind of rapes are taking place. And we should really be worried about these things, that how the psychology of those dirty minds, those men who rape women every day, and they don't even think of the age. They try to spoil small girls, molestate them. They don't even think about the women who are 70s and 80s. So we are worried about the mentality and psychology of these kind of dirty minds, which we think they should be counseled very in very different manner, or they should be punished as soon as possible. The rape is declared that they have done this. Now, day by day we find best places to counsel and to give awareness sessions there.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.